You know what the biggest problem with Spider-Man movies has been over the last few years? Every time we get one, we end up waiting 3 or 4 years for the next. By the time it finally arrives, we almost forget what makes Spider-Man so special in the first place. So when the first trailer for Spider-Man Brand New Day dropped, everyone expected the usual Marvel formula. But after watching it, I honestly came away surprised, and for all the right reasons.
This movie reminded me that Spider-Man stories don't have to rely on giant multiverse events or non-stop action to be memorable. Sometimes the strongest Spider-Man stories are the most personal ones. So in this review, we're keeping things completely spoiler-free. We'll talk about the movie's overall vibe, the direction, the performances, and whether it's actually worth watching. And trust me, by the end, you'll understand why this movie could be a big deal for the MCU's future.
The story picks up right after Spider-Man No Way Home. The world has completely forgotten that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. MJ doesn't remember him, Ned doesn't remember him either, and Peter has chosen not to reconnect with them because after losing Aunt May, he can't bear the thought of putting the people he loves in danger again. So now, he's living with that choice completely on his own.
Peter has fully embraced life as Spider-Man. Day and night, he's out protecting New York, throwing himself into the job to distract himself from everything he's lost. The one person who keeps crossing his path is Frank Castle, better known as the Punisher. They don't exactly get along, but somehow they keep ending up on the same side. And that's where the movie's emotional journey really begins.
This isn't just another superhero movie about stopping the bad guy. At its core, it's a story about loneliness. Peter has buried his grief behind the Spider-Man mask and convinced himself that staying alone is the only way to protect the people he cares about. But that belief is about to be tested in a way he never expected. Everything changes when the Department of Damage Control comes under attack by a mysterious new threat. This villain has the terrifying ability to switch bodies, making it almost impossible to know who you can trust. As the danger grows, Peter realizes that trying to carry the entire weight of the city on his own isn't the solution anymore.
Now let's talk about the direction, because this is where the movie really surprised me. Destin Daniel Cretton, who previously directed Shang-Chi, takes Spider-Man in a much more grounded direction. Instead of making everything feel huge and flashy, he keeps the camera close to Peter, making every swing through New York feel fast, personal, and surprisingly real.
The cinematography does an incredible job of putting you right alongside Spider-Man. Instead of feeling like you're watching a superhero from a distance, it feels like you're moving through the city with him. That creative choice makes Peter's loneliness hit even harder because you're experiencing the world from his perspective almost the entire time. New York also feels completely different this time around. It's not the bright, polished superhero city we've seen before. Instead, it feels older, busier, and much more grounded. People are focused on their own lives, and Spider-Man isn't treated like the center of the universe. He's just another person trying to make a difference in a city that never slows down.
That said, the movie isn't perfect. The editing feels a little rough in a few places. There are moments where the emotional tension starts building, but before the scene has time to breathe, it suddenly cuts straight into the next action sequence. It's not a huge problem, but it's noticeable enough to interrupt the flow every now and then. Now let's talk about the biggest surprise in the movie, Jon Bernthal's Punisher. At first, the idea of pairing the dark, brutal Frank Castle with Spider-Man seemed a little strange. On paper, it didn't feel like a natural fit. But once you see them together on screen, their chemistry works much better than you would expect. Frank is still the Punisher we know. He's tough, damaged, and carries years of pain with him. The movie tones down some of his brutality to fit the PG-13 rating, but his personality never feels watered down. And his constant back and forth with Peter creates some of the funniest and most heartfelt moments in the entire film. One thing I really liked is that the writers don't treat Frank Castle like a one-dimensional action machine. He's still carrying his trauma, but he feels like someone who's slowly learning to live with it. His relationship with Peter starts to feel less like two heroes working together and more like two broken people trying to help each other move forward. Sadie Sink also delivers a surprisingly strong performance.
Without getting into spoilers, her character has more emotional depth than I expected. Some parts of her backstory follow familiar MCU territory, but she brings enough personality and emotion to make the role feel memorable. Bruce Banner also has a much bigger impact than I anticipated, and his scenes carry real emotional weight instead of feeling like a quick cameo. For me, the emotional heart of this movie comes from Peter and Frank's conversations. There's one moment where Frank tells Peter that if he had just one more chance to see the people he lost, he wouldn't waste a single second hiding how he feels. That simple conversation becomes the turning point for Peter's entire emotional journey. Peter has spent so much time believing that isolation is the only way to protect the people he loves. But this movie keeps challenging that idea. Through memories of Aunt May and the people he's lost, Peter slowly realizes that healing doesn't happen by shutting everyone out. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is let people back into your life. Now let's talk about where the movie stumbles. The first act feels a little uneven. It rushes through Peter's recent years, quickly showing different encounters and major events before the story really has time to settle. At times, it almost feels like the movie is checking boxes instead of letting those moments naturally breathe. Another issue is the main villain. The performance is solid, but the character's origin follows a formula we've already seen several times in the MCU. Because of that, some of the big reveals become a little predictable. Thankfully, the actor brings enough intensity to keep the villain engaging, even when the writing feels familiar. Overall, Spider-Man Brand New Day is a movie that puts its faith in heart instead of spectacle. It isn't perfect, the pacing can be uneven, the villain feels a bit familiar, and a few editing choices hold it back. But whenever the story focuses on Peter, his grief, and his relationships, that's where the movie truly shines. By the time I left the theater, I felt genuinely satisfied. The more I thought about the movie afterward, the more I noticed its flaws, but none of them were big enough to ruin the experience. With a little more polish, this could have been one of the greatest Spider-Man movies ever made. As it stands, it's still a very good film and an important step forward for Peter Parker's story. One quick heads up before you leave the theater. There's only an end credit scene, so don't walk out too early. And if you've already seen the movie, let me know your spoiler-free thoughts in the comments. In the next video, we'll break down that ending, explain the post-credit scene, and talk about what it could mean for the future of the MCU. If you enjoyed this review, comment web slinger, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.